How's it going, everybody? And today we're going to be back on the 2024 NFL Draft Board. However, with a special guest here, I'm joined by All 22 Films. I'll leave his description to his YouTube channel in the description. But more importantly, how's it going, All 22?
Good man. You can just call me Coach DC if you want.
Coach DC.
I appreciate the offer. You've asked me a couple times. I'm sorry I wasn't able to follow through before. As I told you, pre-show, kind of busy, like we all are with the draft season.
Of course.
But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so today we're just going to be discussing some NFL prospects we like, some players we've gone over from our film breakdowns, and also some situations from both of our favorite teams. I know that you're a Ravens guy, I'm a Jets guy, some scenarios that we could be discussing about the draft, and then anything in between. So we're starting off pre-video about the quarterback class, primarily about guys like Jaden Daniels, Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy. So if you would want to start with one of them and want to discuss a bit about your findings or your opinions on these guys.
The guy that I was not surprised that I really liked was Michael Penix. I would, in watching over there in the regular season, I don't know about you, but I tend to watch intermittently college football during the regular season because I spend so much time on the NFL. And I wasn't surprised that I liked Penix. The anticipation, the ability to read coverages quickly. I feel like he had favors done to him by his offensive coordinator, but that's the offensive staff's job. That's what a good coach should do. I wasn't surprised that I liked his film when I finally got the chance to watch it. I was very surprised that I liked the Bo Nix film. After the first three games, I finally messaged the guys in my Discord. I was like, "Hey, what's the knock on Bo Nix? What is it that's out there that people don't like?" Because I couldn't find it myself personally.
Yeah, I really feel like it's the main defactor of him is the age. The only thing that when I was watching Oregon this year was the depth of a lot of his targets. A lot of it was dink and dunk, but that was more or less their system and guys running a bunch after the catch like Troy Franklin, Chez Johnson. But more importantly, his accuracy was phenomenal. I mean, 77. You don't just accidentally get to 77% completion percentage.
Right.
Michael Penix Jr. is a guy that I also like a ton. I don't really get the a ton of the big negatives on him outside of the two ACL tears and the age. I mean, he just ran a 4.46, which is crazy because he didn't use his legs that much. But this dude can make some pinpoint throws. And I was watching when I was watching Odunze, when I was watching Jalen Polk. I mean, the balls were just put in exact places for them to take it, to have an advantage, balls that only the receiver can catch. But yeah, another thing about the quarterback class is J.J. McCarthy, the most controversial player outside of obviously Caleb Williams. I literally just finished off my film for J.J. McCarthy. I see a lot of really consistent mistakes, such as throwing behind receivers, not leading receivers. I know his pressure to sack ratio was very good, only 16%, and also he had a 71% completion percentage on throwing outside of the pocket. But J.J. McCarthy to me doesn't feel to me as realistically a top 6 pick in this draft.
No, I wouldn't say that he would be in pretty much every draft, the ones that I've paid attention to. I mean, first of all, he's super talented as an athlete. You can see that. There's two escape throws that I saw him make from 2022, actually. I was just watching film and kind of cutting it up today. I think it was against Penn State. Underrated defense at Penn State the last 2 years under Manny Diaz. And I saw a couple of throws and I was like, wow, that there's a lot that he can do there. And then I saw a series of them and most of them were moving out to his right. He's a right-handed quarterback.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, that as far as consistency compared to some of the other guys, there's one level or maybe two that he's not been at compared to those other players. And look, Michigan had a lot of good football players. I think Harbaugh even said that when he went back for their pro day. He said, "Wow, I see why we won the national title because we had a lot of talent."
Yeah, they've got so many either future NFL players, especially on that defense, but then you have the basically 6 NFL offensive linemen, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, who will be an NFL player. Then you got Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson. I mean, you got A.J. Barner, obviously McCarthy, and then you have the guys on defense like Will Johnson, Chris Jenkins. You've got a ton of guys.
It's
But I
just
guess.
so
Oh, sorry.
no, sorry. It's just so interesting to me, like the situation that these guys go to, particularly like those three that you've mentioned, Jaden Daniels and Drake May, I think as well. For example, Penix and Nix, they were in their systems they played in were more similar to each other than the system that McCarthy played in at Michigan, obviously. And Penix and Nix, I think, there was this, particularly at Oregon, they've done this for years. I remember when Oregon first became a really great spread team, meaning they were able to threaten for the first time the top 10 or 15 teams in the country. There was a time period where Oregon did not belong there. Young people, perhaps such as yourself, maybe not remember that time. I don't know. Forgive me if you do,
Probably
but
don't.
there
Little
was a time
youngster.
where Oregon was not viewed as a top tier program. One of the things they did originally that was somewhat new, I guess, was out of spread formations, put three to the boundary, and it was normally a bunch formation. And I would say that they still do that, even though they've cycled through multiple coaching staffs and offensive coordinators. There's aspects of their attack that have remained the same. And as it relates to Bo Nix, that's one of them. Bunch to the boundary, a quick hitch out there, which would put his, I guess, average depth of target really low.
Yep.
I'm okay if people who evaluate Bo Nix just take those throws out. Just ignore those throws. Focus on all the other ones that are at the depth that you want them to be. And for me, I see a guy who's got a lot of talent. I'm not one who thinks that every draft should be quarterback top heavy. Nonetheless, if Bo Nix gets drafted in the first round, I think that's appropriate. I think there's a team or multiple teams out there that will look at him and say, we're going to pick him in the first round because we want to have that fifth-year extension opportunity, and we think that he can either start now for us or sit behind someone for a year and give us 4 years of quality quarterback play. I think he's really talented. More arm strength than Penix, which I know is exactly the opposite of what other people say. I think Penix is a guy who kind of places the ball out there a little bit more. I do think Penix, as far as accuracy goes, is a little less accurate throwing deep to his left, which makes sense. He's a
Yeah.
left-hander. It's more difficult for him to get his hips oriented in that direction. A lot of right-handed quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson being one of them, have trouble throwing deep to their right. It's the opposite direction of the intention of their
Yeah.
their shoulders in the middle of their chest. So as far as those guys go, I would say McCarthy would clearly, for me, be behind those two in the system that he's probably going to end up in, which is more similar to what Penix and Nix played under in college.
Yeah. And I also feel like McCarthy is one of those quarterbacks that needs a few more years to sit and learn and just. I really feel like he just needs more reps. I don't think he had enough time starting under Michigan. I could see a lot of those young quarterback mistakes showing on tape, and I feel like he just needs a couple of years to more or less marinate. When Penix and Nix absolutely don't need it because Nix had a humongous turnaround when he went to Oregon. At
Yeah.
Auburn, he was terrible. At Oregon, he was very, very good. And then Penix, obviously, he's had a long time in college football, too. So those quarterbacks are more or less pro-ready already. And then you got McCarthy, who's more or less needs more time.
So no, sorry. I think and I forget the gentleman's name. I'll hopefully pronounce his name correctly. He's explained something that's very interesting for young quarterbacks. I think it's Kurt Benkert.
Yeah, Kurt Benkert.
I believe. Yeah, I think he does a great job with the stuff that I see on Twitter, and he's explained this a couple of times. So I'll try to do it a reasonable facsimile here, in that certain offensive structures require the quarterback to deal with the protection scheme, and certain ones do not. And I think the way he's explained the difference between some of the Shanahan-esque offenses is that in the Kyle Shanahan offense with the 49ers, the quarterback is not responsible for that. And so there's an element that's not added to the quarterback's list of jobs on each individual play, such that it allows them to focus on less things and hopefully be better with being freed up of that mental responsibility compared to other systems that he played in. I think it's Ben Kirk. Is that how you say his name again?
Yeah, I know he did play for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
The one thing that I always, or the one thing that Benkert got flamed on heavily was because he was qualifying highlights as film when he was talking about, especially Jaden Daniels, which kind of took me aback. But it was a bit interesting that
Yeah,
he
so
did.
I think if McCarthy was able to get into a system where there was less responsibility, like that distinction that I think he was making there, and I may have done a poor job explaining it. I think if McCarthy was able to get into one of those systems, that he could have more success early. Certainly,
Mm,
nobody expected Brock Purdy to have success. I think that was the point that he was making as far as for young quarterbacks being able to step into the league. If you do it in other systems, the Green Bay system, or I think even McVay's, you're responsible for a larger net of things pre-snap, which I think is going to cause most rookies difficulty if they've
yeah,
never done that before. And I don't think that most of those guys have. So it's not just the physical traits and the mental traits, it's the responsibility tree that your head coach slash offensive coordinator gives you as well. So again, it comes back to the situation those guys end up in. I think those first five guys are obviously more suited to do a good job, to be effective and efficient across multiple systems than McCarthy is.
yeah. I mean, I'm in agreement totally with that. But we can transition to the, which is in my opinion the best position group in this draft, which is the wide receivers. In my opinion, I think that the Ravens are definitely in position to draft one, and I would especially like them to pick an X. I would maybe ask of you this: which X built receiver or responsibility, I guess, would you rather want for the Ravens? A guy like Keon Coleman, maybe a guy like Javon Baker, or if possibly a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. falls to you, even though he's maybe not fitting of an X, he's more of just kind of a straight line, go ahead and, go route kind of guy, or Xavier Legette. Any of these options for the Ravens at either the first round or the second round.
I mean, any or all really, but in terms of me personally, the paradigm they don't have, or I should say the player structure they don't have, is they don't have a guy who can just kind of go up and get it. When they did have red zone trouble, this is pre Todd Monken, because there was a team. I believe this year the first 11 red zone trips were all touchdowns. I may be wrong there,
I
but
think so,
it
yeah.
was it was a ridiculous number for a period of time. I think 14 of the first 17 red zone trips were touchdowns. That my numbers may be off there, so forgive me for that. But prior to 2023, they had significant trouble in the red zone, such that when they ended up blowing games third, fourth quarter, it was partially because they settled for field goals so many times earlier in the game, or went for it on fourth down unsuccessfully and just left points on the board. So to answer your question and kind of use that as a platform to do so, they needed a receiver that they could go to down in the red zone who could win.
Yeah.
And Monken's scheme, Monken didn't have that either. He
Yeah,
didn't.
there were it
If you
wasn't an X.
No, if you could hand him something like that, Keon Coleman fits the bill at 30, different projections, where he's going to go. He's typical of the decision that's going to be there for good teams at the end of the first round, right? He'll be there at 30, but he won't be at 62. So
Yeah.
you've got to figure out, do you want to reach and take him at 30, or do you want to trade back when you invariably get those offers? I think the Ravens are in a unique situation in that they need a tackle, but the team right in front of them does not, the Lions. And I actually just finished recording a video tonight before we met here. I'm a little worried that as the draft develops late in the night and the Lions go to pick at 29, if there's guys on the board like Jordan Morgan, Guyton, whoever,
Mm-hmm.
competent tackles, the Ravens fans will be happy. Oh, the Lions aren't taking a tackle, so we're going to get one. Slow down, because there's teams behind you that could very easily look to trade up to the Lions to jump in front of you and leapfrog you and take one. So in terms of that first pick being a receiver, I don't think it will be, to be honest with you, unless, as you said, a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. falls. If you ask me, that's a guy that you can't pass up on.
Yeah,
Keon
I agree.
Coleman, I don't. I really like Keon Coleman. I really do. I like him a whole lot more than other people do, but I don't think he falls into that category of the guy that you have to take if he's there at 30 and you have a starting caliber tackle available at the same time. Hopefully, I said that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I have Coleman in the mid second round. He's my ninth wide receiver. But speaking more or less towards the Ravens' needs, so you're saying that the Ravens are 100% going tackle because I know you just traded Morgan Moses, so that frees up a right tackle spot.
Yeah,
You're on the tackle train for the Ravens?
I think they have to. I don't think they have a choice because of where Ronnie Stanley's contract goes. They couldn't. I thought it was fool's gold for people to talk about cutting Ronnie Stanley this year.
Yeah.
If you looked at the dead cap for a 2-year period, it was unsustainable. Having said that, at the end of this season, if they're in the same position with Ronnie Stanley, I think it's a whole lot more feasible that they could cut him and eat the dead cap for for 1 year. The only way they could do that is if they had another tackle waiting in the wings, and I just don't know that those tackles are going to be out there in the third round because of how many tackles are going to be taken in the first 24 picks probably
I
you're
would say
looking
the
at.
first like 2 rounds. I think there's going to be a big
Yeah,
tackle drought within the third and fourth round. That's what my projection
exactly.
is. That's what my grades are looking like. I think there's going to be a huge drought in that area.
Yeah, they won't be there. So if you don't, and as I've gone through my mock drafts for the Ravens, I mean, sure, like Keon Coleman's sitting there. A couple of times I've done one, and Brian Thomas is sitting there. I'm like, why am I not taking him? Like, why am I
Hmm.
not taking that guy? But the reality is the Ravens have position player talent that's such that they can get the job done. They don't, and they have to improve the offensive line, particularly tackle. There's just no two ways about it. We haven't seen sustained high level pass pro from Daniel Falele, and we haven't, for whatever reason, ever been willing to make Patrick McCarry a starter until someone else gets injured. I think they're in on the tackle, and I think they're in on the tackle 100%.
I'm interested to hear your takes on some of the defensive guys. I know that the Ravens aren't maybe in particularly looking heavily towards defensive guys within the first round, but I'm interested to see like some of your favorite defensive guys. Like for me, it's Byron Murphy the second and Terrion Arnold that I really really like their films. But I'm interested to see any of your guys that really stood out to you.
Some of the similar to what I told you pre-show, some of the higher level guys, I've watched enough film just to know I don't need to watch any more film. There's certain guys, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I watched
Love the Alabama
enough,
boys.
yeah, enough film of them. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Dallas Turner. I'll be honest with you.
Oh, me too. Yeah, I agree.
I'm not. Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson are not guys that I look at in the same level as what other people do, but I hope to have great careers and prove me wrong, particularly if they were to get somehow end up on the Ravens, which I don't think either one of them will.
Yeah, I don't think either.
But Murphy, some of those guys, the higher level players, Latu, I think is the best guy by far
Mm-hmm. Yep.
at that position in terms of talent. Turner, I know is going to be the first guy off the board because he doesn't have the health concerns
Yeah.
there. I think the corner group is similar, and it shouldn't surprise people that the corner group and the receiver group are so deep. That's going to be the same story every year. Why? Because those positions are being coached 12 months a year from the time these kids are 12, 13, 14 years old. The 7-on-7 passing leagues has made those positions better. It's the same way that travel basketball made the basketball skills better, not the game.
Oh
Somewhere
yeah,
around
I totally agree.
2000s, 2004, it's made the game better. The skills better, I should say.
Yeah. So I'm also similarly on the train with actually both of the guys you mentioned, Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson. Speaking about Dallas Turner, for me, when I was watching his film, I just saw a lot of just inconsistencies. It felt like he didn't generate pressure at a consistent enough level. A lot of his pass rushing, more or less like his plan kind of didn't work out most of the time. The big sacks that he was making were either, converting speed to power and just running through somebody, or a quick, quick bend off the edge and then just chasing down the quarterback. But then obviously the athletic traits are definitely there with Dallas Turner. Also, 5-star recruit at a high school, people really look at those stars. I feel like
Yeah.
within the draft community and stuff like that, as well as Chop Robinson. The thing that really speaks to me about him is just the quick burst and bend off the edge. It's kind of he just will snap in an instant. But also, this is a guy with a very like this is a guy with small snap count. Only played 300 snaps last year in 10 games. It's around 30 snaps a game. He
Yep.
feels like he feels kind of like a two down edge rusher. And also that Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson both share a fact in they don't lack a ton of play power, and they also aren't the best at defending the run or setting the edge.
Yeah, when I've watched Chop Robinson film, first of all, he's an extremely athletic guy.
Yeah.
He's got a great, great burst, great get off, fun to watch. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Having said that, his most impactful plays for me at least was stunting or slanting inside on a planned blitz stunt where someone else is blitzing off the edge, or where he was able to just out athlete a tackle. I mean, he was matched up against a really poor left tackle for Iowa that he defeated 3 times with a
Yep.
speed rush. Quite poor technique. He's not going to see anybody like that in the NFL. His size for the speed that he has is the thing that concerns me from a perspective of the two teams that I do film of, the Ravens and the Lions. Both of them will be looking at drafting outside linebacker. The Ravens will not be taking someone like Chop Robinson at 30, and nor do I think the Lions will. The Lions already have a player that's a
James Houston.
James Houston, the fourth, who's a speed rusher, small, that's generally going to be in on pass downs. I don't see them overlapping in that way. The edge rusher position, the more that I have watched the film of it, the less I've been impressed with that group.
Yeah, I'm a
to
little
be
lower
honest
on them,
with you.
too.
There's 3 other names. I'm not going to mention them here because I don't want to be inflammatory, guys I watched film of and I decided not to produce any Twitter or Patreon videos of because I didn't want to be overly negative. Probably stopped watching film after about 1.5 games was enough. The corner position is on the other end of the spectrum, and the safeties. You know, there's a lot of guys there who can play, and a lot of guys there who can play multiple coverages. And it's going to be fun to see how that group works itself out, you know, in the first day or two of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, also similar thing with Leatu Latu, because when I was watching, I forgot to mention him along with those names as well. Latu's got a bag. He's got a bag of pass rush moves, and I think that's one of the things that I really saw about him is he's consistently trying to put in combos or using his hands at the point of attack really well.
Yep.
And then also guys like in the interior defensive line, like Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton. Byron Murphy, such an interesting prospect because you would have thought that the 360-pound T'Vondre Sweat was going to be playing the nose tackle. Meanwhile, Sweat was like the 4-eye, or he was the 3 tech. Byron Murphy was the 2-eye or the 0 or the 1 tech, just eating up blocks. And he had a 19.6 pass rush win rate while being double teamed at such a high rate. I mean, Byron Murphy, also another guy, quick first step off the line of scrimmage, good pass rush moves. But Jerzon Newton, he moves very, very well. I know he's a bit of a lighter interior defensive tackle, like 295 pounds, but
It's a guy from Illinois, right?
Yep, Illinois.
He's a badass. I watch a lot of Big Ten film. I really was like, when I started the process of looking at draft prospects, I decided to start with the Big Ten because I felt like I was going to be watching games that overlapped. You know, I wouldn't watch these 3 games from the Big Ten and then these 3 from the SEC. Just to be efficient with my time. I've got 2 kids in the house and a wife. So to try to be as efficient with my time as I can. I told you before the show, like I'm a 4 a.m. riser now to try to get my film done. And that dude's a badass from Illinois. Latu is the only, as far as the edge defenders, he's the only guy that I've watched film of, let me preface it, who has, I think, all the moves.
Yeah,
right now.
I mean, yeah.
The other guys, were, I didn't think, complete finished products. If they were boxers, they'd be guys with power in one hand, and Latu is a guy with power in both hands. But the injury history, obviously, could cause him to fall further. I can't see some of these teams who need an outside linebacker edge rusher. Why would you pass up on that talent? I can't see you doing that. And then if the guy stays healthy for 10 years, he's a potential Hall of Fame talent.
Yeah, it feels like it just feels like he's kind of going to be ultra consistent because he just is very consistent on tape in every game that I watched. I watched like 4 or 5. Felt like he was extremely consistent in all of them. And then the moves that he does, he has a high success rate. But I was also wondering a bit about Jared Verse. Some people are extremely high in Verse. Some people are really low in Verse. I like Verse's power, and I think his bull rush is you're going to find only a better bull rush in maybe Darius Robinson because he's 285 pounds. But Verse has a ton of power. It just more or less had a rougher start to the beginning of the season. And I feel like his best move is kind of his bull rush, and he lacks a bit of versatility within the rest of his moves.
Yeah, I haven't watched enough. I'm just now starting to watch Renardo Green film and try to. Yeah, I really like him. And notice Verse obviously on the film because you get the all 22 or sideline, and then
Hmm.
you also get the end zone. So I do like Jared Verse. I think the Robinson comparison in terms of this edge rusher draft makes sense to me. About the same size. Verse a little more bulky, less smooth, obviously, than Latu and Turner. So I can't really give a complete evaluation of him. I mean, he certainly looks like a really good football player. I think he had 9 sacks each of the last two
Yep.
years. I don't share other people's concerns, such that, oh, most of his sacks are coming against lesser competition. I've seen him have some really good reps against some high level teams. Number one, number two. I think there's other guys in this draft that you could say that about more so than Jared Verse.
Yeah, I liked Versus, especially against LSU. He kind of
Yep.
he was. I mean, Will Campbell is a great left tackle. I think he has a chance to go in the first round next year. But Verse was giving him hell really. But the only difference between like Robinson and Verse is the weight, because Robinson's like 285 pounds, but such a weird prospect because he's 285 pounds rushing from the 5 tech, which is, you
Yep.
would have thought he was more of a 4-eye, aka a 3-4 defensive end.
Yeah. What sold me on the Morgan guy from Arizona, not to switch gears to
Oh yeah, yeah,
offense,
of course, offensive
was
tackles.
was was the game between Arizona and UCLA because Latu
Mm,
was on the other side going against Arizona's right tackle about a quarter and a half, something like that. It seemed like about 20, 25 minutes of gameplay. And then all of a sudden got moved over to go against Morgan. And the first 5 pass reps, Morgan just swallowed him up. I mean, it was multiple moves. Latu, get to his credit, one move didn't work. Let me try something else. And none of them worked. Now, he did get a sack off of that side,
he
but it was
did.
on a play where the tight end was responsible for blocking him. It wasn't against Morgan.
I remember that rep.
So, yeah, so that's what sold me on Morgan. I was like, wow, this guy's really smooth. So I just haven't been as impressed overall with the edge defender group this year as in other years. Corner, wide receiver stick out. I really do like the inside linebacker group, I'll be honest with you, but
Mm.
I can't get to all of the guys because they're not concentrated in one conference. I described to you how I watched the film by conference. And these guys are so separated by conference. I haven't even really watched much film of the NC State kid at all.
I just finished my Peyton Wilson. Just finished my Peyton Wilson film. He is just kind of a guy. I mean, he carried NC State's defense. I know he won the Benerick Award, but Peyton Wilson, he just flies around on tape. I mean, he I mean, he's a 4-4-3 guy. It really makes sense, but he looks just as fast as like any wide receiver he faced or any running back he faced last year. But speaking about, I guess, the Big Ten, if we're transitioning to that for the inside linebackers, then like guys like Junior Colson and Michael Barrett from the Michigan, I have Junior Colson as my third inside linebacker, a bit smaller, but a guy that looks very good.
Some of the guys that are out there at Penn State has had each year. Penn State's had smaller, guys on the inside. In this case, happens to be Jacobs.
Yep.
Not as high personally on those guys, but I can't give you film to reference for this year. I just know from previous years watching other guys from Michigan and Penn State, I didn't think those guys looked. I didn't think they carried the reputation that I heard about. To be honest with you, now in terms of Junior Colson, I can't quote games or anything to you. To be honest with you, I never felt like those guys were players I looked at inside linebacker, and they gave you the ceiling of Peyton Wilson or Edgerrin Cooper or even a Jeremiah Trotter. For me, I didn't think those guys from the Big Ten fit in that same category as those guys, particularly Cooper and Wilson. Those guys are
Yeah.
fundamentally sound, but they're also going to give you the splash plays
Yeah,
too.
those guys they fly
Cooper's
around.
ridiculous.
Cooper, yeah,
Yeah.
he's a little wild. He's a little wild, but it kind of makes sense. He flies around everywhere, and a great pass rusher too, especially as a blitzer.
Nuts. Those guys are when you have those guys. Yeah, absolutely. Those inside linebackers that can give you something as a blitzer, and nowadays with so much that's done. As a Ravens fan, I know a lot about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
so much that's done with these guys, like picking the offensive guard or center, such that a defensive tackle can loop around. Um, there's almost no answer for it offensively once the defense, know your protection scheme. If we run the correct pick stunt, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
And that's one of the ways that the Ravens were able to get so much pressure the last 2 years with what some would describe as less talented pass rush groups
Yeah.
overall is having the right stunt called at the right time. And that's just, defensive preparation from the coaching staff and then the players being able to recognize it. Those guys, Wilson and Cooper, to me, Trotter to a lesser extent, they appear to be able to offer you plays coming forward against the pass and the run, plays at depth, and then cover the pass as well. Super talented guys. I don't have really much knowledge. I can't be as positive about the Big Ten inside linebackers, to be honest with you, because the film that I watched, I'm just not that impressed with the Big Ten inside linebackers as other people are.
Interesting. And then Jeremiah Trotter, kind of more of a coverage guy. But I guess swinging over to the offensive tackles, a guy that I was super impressed with. Obviously, everybody knows that Joel is, I think, he's the best tackle that I've seen in my like 3 years of doing film. But a guy I was super impressive was Talisa Fuaga out of Oregon State. He was a guy that I watched go up against Leod Tillatu, and he gave up, I think, only one pressure. The only thing I have
Yeah.
a bit questionable about Fuaga is lateral quickness and hitting his drops. And speed rushers can also get around him, but this dude is a mauler in the run game. Great power within his hands, but the run blocking ability, I think, with Fuaga is something that I just can't ignore. And then guys like Amarius Mims
Yeah.
also. But yeah,
The further you get down this list, I don't know about you, but you still have guys with talent. Like I'm scrolling down on the list that you provided me, and you've got Suamatea and Fisher down here, and I guess the fifth or sixth tier. I guess one, two, three, four, five, six.
those are my fourth round guys.
Yeah, but those are still. I mean, those are still talented guys who
Yeah,
certain teams will be able to plug them in and play. And every year, I don't know if how you guys do it, but every year there's always 4 or 5 tackles who come into the league and start who were picked in the third or fourth round by various teams. And we get to, like, as a Ravens fan and now doing Lions content as well, you get to week 6 or week 8 or week 10 and we face a team and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that guy's starting? And doing a pretty good job. I'm talking about for the other team that we face. And I'm like, that guy's starting. So these guys down here, and even at that level there, I don't know as much about a guy at Missouri. I haven't watched the Missouri offense a ton, to be
Javon
honest with you.
Foster.
But yeah, Sui Matea and Fisher, to be in that tier just tells you how much depth there is at the offensive line. There's going to be, I think, a lot of teams trading up 4, 5, 6 spots, not necessarily in the first round, for tackle, but second round to try to get their tackle before that position runs dry. Because, like you said earlier, it's going to eventually. It's a deep group.
Yeah. The one, I guess, reason why I have Kingsley Sumatai a bit lower is because the one game that I watched from BYU this year was against Texas, and he got ran over. He allowed like 2 sacks and 4 pressures, which is the big reason why I'm a bit lower on him. But Blake Fisher also. I mean, it felt like he was a bit more of a budget Joe Alt. They kind of play relatively similar. They're also kind of taught the same from Notre Dame. They're taught relatively the same technique, but different positions, different sides. Just felt like a bit of a not as dominant as Joe Alt, not as much of a wall as him. But yeah, the tackle class is super. He's got a lot of depth. It does lose me a bit in the end, but it feels like a big. It does feel like there is a gap between like the third and fourth round, but then you get a little bit more juice with some like hyper athletic guys like Garrett Greenfield, and then you got what is it, Jalen Sundell, I think, as well. Jalen Sundell, a bit of a weird prospect because he's got a 77-inch wingspan, but he played at left tackle, but also played at center. But there are a ton of guys in the tackle class that are a bit interesting, really. A bit of a lighter tackle class, I will say as well. But I feel like the relatively the offensive line class does lose me more in the end, but it has a lot of. For like the center class, you've got Jackson Powers Johnson, who's phenomenal. You got Zach Frazier, who's getting a ton of hype. Graham Barton is listed as really an interior offensive lineman, but he played left tackle all the time at Duke. Christian Haynes is a guy that I like a ton. Cooper BB, Christian Mahogany, Zach Zinner, Mason McCormick. You got a ton of guys in the beginning that are going to be really high up, and then you have that gap in the third and fourth round. But also speaking more or less of the Jets, with the Jets tackles consistently go down all the time. So I really need them to invest a tackle in the third round.
All you got to do is keep Aaron Rodgers upright and
Yeah.
protected, and you're going to win football games. Period. You're going to exploit defenses. He's going to get you in the right look. The game is easy for him at this point. It
Mm-hmm.
just is. He's a absolute master at understanding the width of the field, how defenses line up. Those guys, what they can. I'm sure you saw it. The C.J. Stroud video where he's breaking down one play. I mean, cool. He's
Mm-hmm.
going through the different pre-snap thoughts and everything. That's great. But even at how impressive that is for a young man to be able to do that, the level that Mahomes, Rodgers, Josh Allen, that those guys would be on is even better than that. And
Yeah.
Rodgers, I would put at the upper tier of that for the guys that are around. All you guys got to do is keep him upright. That's why it was interesting for me when they traded back for Morgan Moses. I kind of wasn't surprised because I had used his film with the Jets when he came over to the Ravens, so it wasn't surprising to me because it's an expiring contract after 1 year. So they were, able to be free of that contract. Hopefully, they can protect Aaron Rodgers
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and keep that offensive line upright. But you're right; they do have a history of tackles getting hurt, unfortunately.
Yeah, especially about their offseason moves. Other than that, you got John Simpson, another Ravens guy, 2 years, 18 million, and then you signed Tyron Smith for left tackle, but also injury-prone
Hmm.
guy. He has not had a full season in a while. So I think that the investment for offensive line is still a necessity. Probably not at
Hmm.
10, but it's my wish for them in the third and fourth round, especially because you got, well, this is where the well is going to start to dry up, which is why I hope that they trade back in maybe the late second round. Hopefully, get a guy like Roger Rosengarten, or if Tyler Guyton falls, because he's a bit raw in my opinion. But he's getting a ton of draft hype because he's huge, like 6'7", 320 pounds, long wingspan.
Very
But
athletic.
and athletic too. But yeah, I think that the Jets definitely need tackle.
I think you guys are in a great place, man. I really love the Jets defense. I have for a couple of years. I love how fast they play. I love what they do with the defensive ends. I wasn't a huge fan of them of Huff, leaving, but hey, the
Yeah, me
contract he
too.
got, the contract he got, the Jets weren't going to be able to handle that.
Nah,
I don't
but they just
think.
traded for Hassan Reddick though.
Right, right, right. And then trade for Reddick, and then extended him as well, right?
They gave him like another. I think he has money still coming in from the Eagles, but they just gave him 15.5 million, if I'm not correct,
Yeah,
for some type of extension.
I love what they do on defense. I love how fast they play. I'm a
Quincy Williams,
huge
shout out.
yeah, I'm a huge Ahmad Gardner fan. I was a huge fan of his film coming out of college, and I understand that quote the interceptions aren't there, but that's a shutdown
Oh
defense
yeah,
against good teams, very good teams. That is, they're going to give people problems now that Aaron Rodgers is going to be around, and if you protect him, and you're going to score points with I think average to above average talent on offense. Where you guys are sitting at 10, you're in a great position, if you ask me, to for a talent infusion offensively if you want to.
yeah, of course. I do think that the biggest issue with the Jets has always been injuries and making it healthy enough to the playoffs. But I feel like this year, if everything hopefully comes together, then we'll finally see that playoff drought get away. But I think that the Jets opened themselves up for a ton of flexibility at 10 because now you have options if you want to trade up for a
Right.
receiver, if you want to trade down and still get a tackle to mold for the future, if you want to get Brock Bowers for just a fun player because Brock Bowers is essentially a big slot who is listed as a tight end, but this dude is Brock Bowers. I think is the best tight end I've ever seen. I think he's the best tight end prospect potentially ever. But you've got a ton of flexibility at 10 as well as trading, probably most
Exactly.
likely trading
On
down.
handling the tackle issue pre-draft and improving. Now I'm going to tell you I'm not a huge fan of the signing of John Simpson for you guys. I did not think that his film warranted that type of salary, but good for him. I'm glad that he got paid
Yeah.
like that. There are some top-heavy issues there at times with him losing contact balance with people
Mm,
after first engagement. So some of the end zone angle film from this past year might scare some Jets fans, to be honest with you. He did get better, though, over the course of 2023. He improved vastly. somewhere around week 6 or week 7. So there's a difference in the overall stats for John Simpson as a guard, I think, versus the first 4, 5, 6 games of the season versus the remainder. At 10, man, for me, when I do my mock drafts and I look at the Jets, I think to myself, they would be scary as hell if one of these badass receivers was available to them to take, along with Garrett Wilson. I know they have other players as well, but just anytime you can hand someone like Aaron Rodgers those weapons, I feel like he's going to make appropriate use of them.
I mean, I've potentially been on the. I mean, I'm heavily on the Adonai Mitchell train. I think this dude is it could be a 1,000+ yard consistent receiver every single year. And if the Jets wanted to trade down or pick him at 10, because Rome Odunze I don't see falling. I don't
No,
understand.
agreed.
I don't see I see him falling out of the top 10 for some reason. Neighbors also I just see the Neighbors probably going 5 if the Chargers don't trade down.
Agreed.
And the Rome Odunze, he's got to go top 9. And Chicago, if Chicago gets a chance to take him, they could move up even. But I think the receivers go a lot higher than people are thinking. I'm thinking like 7, 8 receivers go in the first round.
Yeah, you're not going to be in position to draft, one of those two, and obviously not Harrison either. But Mitchell, Thomas, absolutely are appropriate selections there at 10. It's almost like a guilty pleasure for you guys if Mitchell, Thomas, and Brock Bowers are all there at 10. You
Yeah.
kind of can't go wrong, really.
I mean, yeah, I'm totally in agreement. How about the running back class? I know we were talking about this a bit before. I'm a little bit. I'm just kind of flat out saying I'm definitely lower on the running back class. I think it is either the worst or the second worst position group in this draft. It's not more or less that the talent isn't there or the production wasn't there for the running back class. It's just more of the superstar 3 down talent that was in last year's draft, or maybe the two down talent in Jameer Gibbs, who had a phenomenal year. But it's just really lacking those 3 or 4 guys that I see as future 1,000-yard running rushers or really efficient guys. I think this draft has 4 or 5 guys that I even see being extremely productive starters, and then the rest are kind of RBCs or low on the depth chart kind of guys. But I was interested in your
Yeah.
thought on the running back class.
Yeah, I think running back is always, I don't want to say difficult to evaluate. I think we all, myself included, look at some of the classes. I just did it with outside linebackers earlier and say I'm not a huge fan of it. Running back, I feel like, is on a consistent basis, you're going to get 2 or 3 running backs every year that are going to surprisingly contribute 400, 500 yards to a team that you maybe didn't anticipate. There's such talent at that position anyway, running back, not just the NFL, college and high school, such that when you get to this level and you've got the top 20 or 25 running backs available to be selected, I feel like there's always going to be guys who can do 1 or 2 things. For example, you've got a guy from New Hampshire who's a badass pass
Dylan
catcher
Lobb?
of the football. Yes.
Yeah.
And, regardless of rankings or whatever, he's not going to be one of the first 8 or 10 or maybe even 12 running backs taken off the board, but that's a guy who can contribute something to your football team. It surprises me some of the guys that are out there with people being so low on the running back class, as in it's horrible. Some of the guys have some really damn good film, particularly the 2 SEC guys, Wright and Brooks. Not even mentioning Benson. I mean, I think Benson's a guy who's somehow being underrated. Your grade on him seems pretty damn good to me.
For who?
But
Esteem?
Benson, yeah, Benson's a guy that I
Oh,
don't
Trey
know how
Benson.
people
Yeah.
are.
Trey Benson's.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think he's underrated anymore, but I feel like people coming into the
yeah,
draft had him like in that 6 to 7 range, and then everybody's gotten a bit higher on him, but I got him second.
yeah. He's just smart, and some of these guys are so well trained on whatever the scheme is, zone scheme, outside zone, gap scheme, people call it now, just power. Those guys are all so well trained at this stuff that there's really a small margin for error for the defense. I think there's guys who can step in and play. I don't know if it's 4 or 5 of them. I don't like Braylon Allen as much as
Me
I
neither.
thought I would.
Me neither.
It doesn't mean I don't think he can be a good player. The first couple of games I watched on him, I was like, oh wow, this is really impressive, particularly for a young guy. I think he turns
He
21, right?
he's a 2004 baby, and I'm a 2004 kid too. But he's January. I'm November. But yeah, he's
Yeah,
young.
so
He just turned
very young.
21. Or no, he just
Yeah,
turned yeah, just turned 21. No, wait.
yeah. So
He just turned 20.
he's very young. I knew he's never redshirted, right?
Yep.
And he's one of those kids that could have, theoretically reclassified because of his age. Some people reclassify later. He did not. So he never redshirted, and he's very young. Unique talent, if you ask me, for his size and the age that you have there. But none of these guys, other than Brooks, is probably going to be drafted, anywhere near the first round, right?
Yeah, but Brooks has got an ACL, and
He's
ACL is a
got the ACL, right?
humongous deterrent for running backs, especially coming
Yep.
into the draft. I don't.
Yeah.
He might even not. I think he's the most talented running back by a good margin, but I don't even think he'll be the first. Maybe not even he'll be the third running back off the board. I see
Yeah.
guys like I see Wright being a huge hit within NFL teams. This dude's extremely efficient, extremely explosive. I see Benson, another guy, 4.39, and more importantly, once he sees a hole, he hits it, and he hits it hard.
He's committed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Blake Corum, extremely productive goal line back, which I think is going to be his mainstay at the NFL level. I don't think I saw him fail just more or less like a 1-2-3, like a three opportunity goal line. I never saw him fail that. And then Bucky Irving, this dude is versatile. It's just the athleticism. He had like a 2 RAS score, but that's not too much of a deterrent because he can catch the ball. He has great change of direction and short area quickness, and he hits the gaps well as well. It's just kind of more of the. I feel like a lot of these guys are 2 down backs.
I think it would look better if Brooks was going to be healthy and playing this year. Then you'd have. I think it could theoretically look better because you'd have a guy well, I mean, Brooks can give you 1,000 yards depending on the situation he
Yep.
goes to. The problem for some of these running backs is they're either going to go into a bad situation. I hate to say it, a bad team,
Yeah.
or B, they're going to go into a situation where they're the number 2 guy or maybe even the number 3 guy on the depth chart, and they've already got 2 guys splitting carries in front of them. Certainly a talent out there. I really like Marshawn Lloyd, the film from USC. Looked good to me, and I really don't even mind the guy. There's a kid from South Dakota State,
Isaiah Davis.
Davis. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
on your list here.
he was cracked
He,
at South Dakota State. I just really care about the FCS talent within the trenches. I do factor that in.
yep,
But Isaiah Davis, he crushed the FCS
yep.
level.
Yep, those teams, those 2 Dakota teams, remember 3, I guess, they actually interest me so much because of how they do things, number one, offensively, and number two, when they have had opportunities to play against, better quote programs, they kick their ass, So like, I just appreciate their style of football and how different they are. They keep those in-state kids there, and they win with them, and nobody else is taking those kids in North Dakota and South Dakota in mass and winning football games with them, but they're doing it consistently.
Yeah, and those it always seems like every year a good bunch of, especially those Dakota guys. It always seems like they're going in the draft.
Absolutely. There's 1 or 2 of them every year. It seems like the film of those teams, they kind of have their own brand of football in some ways. It's a unique situation, and I'm all about, people that accomplish tasks in a different manner than everybody else because, nowadays everybody wants to see 11 personnel spread 100% of the snaps, and you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to try to arrive at the answer in the same manner. And that's the cool thing about the draft is that guys will be slotted to different teams, and unfortunately, some of them it's not going to be a good fit initially. Others, it's going to be a perfect fit. Like I described, the running back from New Hampshire. If he was to go to the right team that could use him in that manner, he's a guy I could see getting 30 catches this year and having 16, 18 first downs because of his receiving skill. But if he goes to the wrong situation, he won't even get an opportunity. Number 1 or number 2, there'll never be the chance for him to get many catches because there'll be a whole bunch of 3rd and 12s.
So I have a question about the tight end class actually. So I do have. I wonder how much film you've watched from the tight end class.
Just the Big Ten guys, that's it. And they're all, I feel like in some ways, some of them are kind of cookie cutter. They're very similar to each other. in the Big Ten. I do like the guy from Ohio State. I feel like he stands
Cade
out.
Stover.
Yeah, among that group of Big Ten tight ends. I don't really, to be honest with you, know a whole lot about the Kansas State offense at all, other than Brock Bowers, which anybody can talk about. The Big Ten guys, I thought, were all pretty talented, and at this point, I don't know how some team wouldn't say, I'm going to take the tight end from Iowa if I've got an additional fourth or fifth round pick. I don't know why you wouldn't at this point with what they've been able to produce in the last 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, with Eric All. He's a bit of an interesting guy. I know he was a transfer from Michigan. It's just kind of the productivity has never been there outside of 2020 or 2021 whenever he was really productive at Michigan. It's just but the potential is there. The athletic traits are there. It's just more or less, are you gonna just blindly say that Iowa is tight end you and just go ahead and make that selection over guys like
If I had an extra pick in the fifth or fourth or fifth round, yes. I mean, because
Iowa, man.
What they've been able to do, it's ridiculous. Whoever's recruiting all those guys, if it's the same person, coaching there for this long, it's kind of unbelievable though how awful the offense is over in its totality. Like when I watched 3 Big Ten defenses just dismantle Iowa's offense.
Their offense. I mean, the last couple of years, but their defense is so good.
Yeah. But their defense, exactly. Even when they had Laporta, it was difficult to watch. And Linderbaum, of course, going to the Ravens, I watched a lot of that film. Still, the offense overall has just always been disappointing there. But that guy at Ohio State, I really like Stover. I saw him take 2 hits this year where I thought his knee was going to get re-injured. And he just got right back up, which was kind of good to see. I didn't think Theo Johnson had the same downfield capability that Stover offered. I don't know what you've seen.
It's more or less the Theo Johnson. The appeal with him is the athletic traits because he's 6'6", 250, 60 pounds. I forgot what it was at the combine, but he ran the 4.65 and he jumped well. He had like a 9.9 RAS score, which is a 99th percentile athlete.
I think the other tight end from Penn State that didn't come out this year is better than him. I'll just be honest with you.
Yeah. And I guess similar thing about like Michigan, AJ Barner is this year, but he's more or less a blocking guy. And then you have Colston Loveland, who is a phenomenal tight end.
He's better. I think that the tight end, the one kid from Penn State, I thought he could have come out, but he's never redshirted. So I like the guys from the Big Ten. I watch a lot of Big Ten football. Trey Knox isn't a bad football player from South Carolina. You've got him rated lower than I would have thought. But I didn't. I watched 3 games of South Carolina's offense. Haven't been able to produce, anything on it yet.
So I guess we'll go to the last position group, which is safety. I have not watched. I think the safety is the class that I've only watched one player from, which is essentially Carmen Kinchins, who I ended up not liking, but I liked him a ton in the preseason. But I have not watched a lot of safety. I wonder if you have.
I mean, I've watched the safeties in the context of watching other guys so far. I think there's far better players here than is perceived. I mean, besides Newbin, who's stands out. Bullard is a badass football player. The other safety from Georgia is pretty damn good too. The USC kid, Bullock, I think.
Yeah,
Bullock.
I'm a bit lower on Kalen Bullock. It's more or less the USC defense was an open door last year.
Oh yeah, they're really
more
awful.
or less a brothel house, but
It's just every year there are corners and safeties that come into the league, and it's the front office's job to find the guys who you can just plug in and they can play right now. Similar to offensive line, what I said earlier, there's guys every single year drafted in the 3rd, 4th round who come in and start and give you great reps from day one until through the playoffs at the DB position. I think it's partially because they're trained better now than they were 15, 20, 30 years ago. There's more passing in high school. There's more passing in college. 7-on-7 leagues that are almost 12 months of football at this point. These guys are better trained in terms of the coverages they're going to see. They recognize things quicker, better trained athletically as well. I think the safety group as a whole, this one might not be as strong to you or others, but generally the DB groups are going to match the wide receiver groups in terms of depth because they're all so well trained
Hmm.
from the time they basically start putting a helmet on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way of kind of matching position groups because I felt like last year the cornerback class was so good, and then you had the wide receiver class was a bit less good last year, more or less. I would say the depth was I think there, but the top end of the wide receiver class last year kind of wasn't. But this year you have the cornerback class is phenomenal, and you have the wide receiver class is phenomenal. But that's an interesting comparison for
Yeah, I don't
the
mean I don't mean on a yearly basis. I mean
more
from
or
an overall
less.
standpoint, you're not going to have offenses that are going to score 48 points per game and no good corners. There's going to be corners who are going to be able to keep up and slow down, or in some cases stop those high level guys. I don't think it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio every year, but the depth of those positions, I think, at corner and safety, and then receiver on the offense is better than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 18 years ago overall because of the style of play at the lower levels is preparing them for that more so.
But before we conclude, anything else you want to talk about? Any players you want to talk about in specific, or anything else?
Well, I'm a Maryland guy and I'm a Ravens fan, so there's certain guys I'm interested to see how they turn out in the pros. Baltimore area kids, Chop Robinson, who we talked about a little bit. There'll be some others I don't mention, but Cam Hart, the corner from Notre Dame, as a good counsel, incredible private school in Maryland, and then Kyrie Jackson, who finished at Oregon, was at Alabama before.
Yep.
He's a public school kid, Wise High School in PG County. Is an amazing football program. Those guys, I'm really interested in seeing where they go, how much success they have in the NFL. I'm not sure, other guys from the area you're from that you're looking forward to seeing just where they get drafted, if any of them end up with the Ravens, which I would love to see Hart or Jackson end up with the Ravens and hopefully be productive players for a long time.
Yeah, I'm quite high on Cam Hart. He is my cornerback six in this class. I really looked at everybody in this class relative to how they performed against Marvin Harrison Jr. and Cam Hart. I felt like was the guy who actually put up a incredible fight really up against Marvin Harrison Jr. Only three
Yep.
catches, 32 yards. But the only guy from my area who really isn't from my area is Christian Haynes from UConn. I don't think there's anybody from Connecticut in this class. But Christian Haynes,
Hmm.
UConn guy, shout out to him. Also, Eric Watts, who I think is very underrated, but obviously another UConn guy. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Again, thank you to Coach DC or all 22 Films. I'll leave his link in the description. Make sure you go subscribe to him. Always putting out especially good NFL content and film content if you guys are interested in that. But thank you to our co-host for the day.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thanks for bringing me on. We can do something again after the draft if you want. It's a fun time, and even trying to collaborate on something when you're trying to go through as much film as you obviously have is tough to do. I've really focused on corners, receivers, safeties, tackle and edge defender somewhat, but you've gone through and if people can't see it, I don't know what you're putting in the video as far as what they can see. He's got as many players as broken down here as anybody else, so it's pretty cool to look at. And if you get the opportunity or if you give access to this, I think people would enjoy checking it out.
Yeah, I do have the link on the Patreon. It is free, so. But yeah, thank you, of course.
Yeah, man.